pass the legislation that is currently pending that would stop the increase in the interest rates on college loans. With that, Mr. President, I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, today
The senator is advised the Senate is in a quorum call.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that calling of the roll be dispensed with.
Without objection.
I thank you, Mr. President. We arrive here at a moment when we once again have a chance to view the differences in thought and perspective are exhibited in this institution, at this moment in this institution. Today we're talking about college education. We're talking about preparation of young people, of people to get an education, go to college. And for generations, affordable college education has been an essential tool for providing opportunity and building a strong society. Now, I know from personal experience that government plays a critical role in making higher education possible. I served in World War II, and when I joined the Army, there was no prospect for me to go to college. I was 18 when I enlisted, and when I finished my Army service, having been in Europe during the war, things looked bleak. But there was an opportunity that loomed in front of me, and that was an ability to attend college. Now, my family was faced with poverty, and there wasn't much money in the family. But there was something called the GI Bill. The GI Bill, government issue, standard meaning, gave me the chance to achieve a dream. I joined with a couple of friends to form a company. The company is called ADP. The company that produces the labor statistics every month that this country and the whole world sees. This company that I was able to start with two other fellows. None of us had any money. The two of them were brothers, and we didn't have any resource at all. We had to start from nothing. And in the days that we had a chance to get going, the future was brightened a little bit by the fact that an education was possible to have. That company that we started with nothing today employs more than 50,000 people around the world. And again, is the company that supplies the labor statistics that we see every month, ADP. You see it on TV. The country invested in my generation by helping us pay for college, and that investment helped create decades of prosperity. As a matter of fact, that generation, post-World War II, was called the greatest generation ever seen in American history. 8 million people who served in the Army out of 16 million got college educations through the GI Bill, and thus this generation that came up that started us on a track for prosperity that this country had never seen. The investment that the GI Bill made in people says when you have a chance to educate people, to get them to go to college, to get them to attend the university, is the way we create the next great generation. But attending college has never more been this expensive. The cost of tuition at public universities is higher by 37% more than just 10 years ago. Think about that. If college 10 years ago cost $40,000, it now costs well over $50,000. And as a result, more and more students are taking on massive loans that will plague them for years. I use the word plague because it's very difficult to get started in life, in business, in family, and be facing heavy debt at the same time. 66% of the New Jersey students graduate with loan indebtedness. The average loan burden for New Jersey graduates is more than $23,000. So no wonder we hear that technology companies are hungry to hire but can't always find people with the education and skills that they need. The price tag alone puts college out of reach for too many people. And the clock is ticking on even higher college costs. Unless Congress acts, interest rates on many student loans are going to double on July 1st, less than 2 months from today. For many students, doubling rates will cost them $1,000 a year more for each year of college. But instead of standing with students, our friends on the Republican side are playing politics. Now, they've made it clear that keeping student loan rates low is a priority. They don't see it as something being worthwhile. 2 Republican senators have introduced budget proposals that would allow student loan interest rates to double. And yesterday, we saw 44 Senate Republicans vote to prevent the Senate from even considering our bill, from getting to work on it, to keep student loan rates low. How heartless. How thoughtless it is to punish our country this way. College is already too expensive. Why would we put up obstacles to get an education? Republicans should listen to people who are suffering from the high cost of college. 1,400 people have written me through mail or Facebook to say, don't let them do it. Don't let them double my rates. A single mother from New Jersey, helping her daughter pay for college, wrote to say that any increase would create enormous hardship and an inability to continue to provide for the family. Another New Jerseyan says that America will not be able to compete with the rest of the world if college is accessible only to those who have the ability to pay for it. And I agree. We will not be able to compete if we don't have the educated people necessary to fill the jobs that are available. Now our Republican friends say they want to prevent the doubling of interest rates. So why don't they step up to the plate? I don't understand that. Say one thing on one hand, oh yeah, we don't want to increase the rates. On the other hand, we're not going to help keep them at the lower rate that they are now. They say in order to pay for keeping rates low for students, we have to cut vital funding for programs that keep people healthy, that provide answers for them when they're ill, or when they need help for their physical condition. Their bill would slash funding for prevention and public health funds, programs dedicated to stop devastating diseases before they occur. Chronic diseases like cancer, heart disease, diabetes take more than 1 million lives every year and account for 75% of our nation's health spending. But that's why Prevention and Public Health Fund has invested $226 million to reduce chronic illnesses. The President's budget also calls for using this program to protect women's health by providing breast and cervical cancer screenings to low-income women. But it won't happen if Republicans continue along their way. The Republican bill would also cripple programs that keep kids from smoking and help smokers to quit. And we've all seen ads, real people telling real stories about how tobacco has affected their lives. We look at this chart and we say, don't be shy about telling people not to smoke around your kids. And we see a picture here of a mother and a child. Republicans don't care about educating people on the dangers of smoking. Who are they protecting here? Certainly not our children, and certainly not our students. It's unconscionable. Republicans profess that they want to keep loan rates low, but only if we sacrifice programs that protect children from smoking addiction and help women avoid breast cancer and other deadly diseases. The Democrats have a better solution. The bill that Majority Leader Reid has introduced pays for keeping student loan rates low by eliminating a tax convenience that millionaires and billionaires use to avoid paying payroll taxes. But rather than close this loophole, the Republicans choose to take this opportunity to talk it to debt. They would rather see interest rates double for students than force the wealthy to pay their fair share of the country's obligation. Student loans open the door to opportunities. Interest rates have to be kept low to protect graduates from a mountain of debt. Mr. President, I call on my personal experience again, if I might. I finished college in my family. My father had passed away while I was in the Army. He was only 43 years old. He left my mother, a 37-year-old widow, to care for herself and my sister. And as luck had it, I got an education at Columbia University at the business school there, and started a company that I mentioned before, ADP. ADP has 45,000 employees, provides services across the world for those companies who need help in doing their payroll accounting and other record keeping that one must do. And it's had an enormous influence on things in our country here. Again, the ADP produces the statistics that we see every month on job filling, unemployment, average rates, hourly rates, things of that nature. And it only happened because we were able to get our educations through the GI Bill. Zero cost to those of us who served in World War II, and even some money to pay for books and for other necessities. And so I call on my Republican colleagues to stop the obstructionism, stop the politicking, stop throwing obstructions in the way of young people who want to get an education and make a contribution to the society as well as to themselves, and elevate America's ability to deal with the competition that we see in the cyber world. So it's time to do that. I'm not suggesting that our Republican colleagues don't want progress. They do. But when we try to move a bill that says keep interest rates low on college loans, keep it low so that when people get out of college that they're not so burdened by debt that they can't get started in life. I say keep them low so that America competes as it should, right at the top of the ladder with educated people, people who want to succeed, don't have the tools necessarily until they finish a college education. Why put obstacles in the way? It's incomprehensible, because there are a lot of good people over there on the other side. But why? They persist in obstructing the opportunity to even discuss it. Want to filibuster it to death. Filibuster for those who aren't who don't know what the term means. It means talk, 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 talk. Do anything but make progress. And so I hope that we'll say to those who have been successful, do your fair share. Let your contribution to the well-being of our country educate those who can learn and not make it so expensive, so out of reach, that few will be able to take advantage of it. I ask them, please, let's move this bill along. Let's let the American people at least know what you think about this legislation to keep interest rates low. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Mr. President, first I would ask unanimous consent immediately following mine that Senator Udall be allowed to speak.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I've been listening to these speeches for the last couple of days, 3 days actually, and if you listen to the other side of the aisle, you'd think that Republicans were against college education. I don't think there's a person in America that believes that. You'd also believe that we want to raise the interest rates from 3.4 to 6.8%. There shouldn't be anybody in America that believes that either. We really think that the rates for 1 year ought to stay at the 3 4/10% and maybe beyond that. But the real issue isn't the interest rate. And you can tell that from the speeches that have been given. The real issue is the cost of college. Are we doing anything about the cost of college? No. Does Congress have anything to do besides to debate this particular issue? Evidently not. We're being called to do nothing Congress, but evidently we don't have anything else to do. It would be possible to go to something else, but instead we had one vote on this. We still weren't given an option for this side of the aisle to put out a vote for their idea. And now we're going to get to vote on that same issue from Tuesday once again, maybe sometime this week, maybe not till next week. Instead, we're going to stay right on this issue, that if we stay at exactly this point in this issue, it will fail again. And then that side can say, oh, those Republicans, they just want to raise interest rates. Not true. But I hope that the American people have noticed that any bill that goes directly from the President to Harry Reid to the floor doesn't pass. A bill that goes to committee, regardless of where the source is, has a chance of a bipartisan solution. I'm the ranking member on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, and we have a user fee bill that passed nearly unanimously out of committee. And we have the support of the stakeholders, we have the support of the companies, we have the support of the Republicans and Democrats, and we've even talked to the House people about it. That's a bill that ought to make it through here pretty quickly. And I suspect that it will. And when it does, I'll bet you don't hear any comment about it, because that would make us look like a do-something Congress, which is what we ought to be doing. You can't tell me that this is the only issue that needs anything done. But we're going to spend a whole week on this issue when both sides agree that it ought to be at 3 4/10%. What we're disagreeing on is how we pay for it. And I got to tell you that the real answer isn't either side's answer. But it could be worked out if it went to committee. Now, I was told that this was going to be a bipartisan, jointly discussed issue just before we left for the recess. Then this bill was put forward and no further conversation was allowed on it. Our committee was left out of it, and we bring it to the floor where they say, oh, we'll have a fair and open debate. Yeah, look at this. There are two of us on the floor and he's waiting to speak. He's not listening to what I'm saying. And there isn't anybody else listening to what I'm saying. Well, they might be back watching the television and picking it up there, and I certainly hope that they are. But where you get the real discussion is in the committees. Small groups of people intensely interested in the issues that come to those committees. And we work it out. Senator Harkin and I will get amendments a couple of days before the bill's to be marked up in committee to find out what everybody's ideas are for how it ought to be changed. And we sit down and we look through those and we say, well, look at this pile here. They're all pretty much the same amendment, but there are people from both sides of the aisle that are interested in that. So why don't we just get those 4 people or those 2 people or those 5 people together and see if they can't work something out. And you know, it's really surprising. They usually can come up with a few changed words that solve the problem that they're both interested in. That's the way you get things done. That's not the way we're operating. I'm on the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee is supposed to be handling taxes. Let's see, how many markups have we had this year? I don't think we've had a single markup. We have not looked at a specific bill and tried to come up with a solution in committee. Nothing has been assigned to that committee to finish. You think we got any tax problems in this country? I think so. We keep talking about tax reform, but we're not doing anything on tax reform. Instead, we're talking about this interest rate on colleges, which is extremely important to the 40% of the students that have a subsidized loan that are going to be protected by this. Extremely important to them. But we keep talking about college and the cost of college, but are we doing anything about the cost of college? No, we're not. That should be disappointing to America. We ought to be covering the big issues. Now, I've got to say that our committee did a bunch of hearings. And I asked for those hearings to be on the cost of all college education. Instead, what we did was beat up on private colleges. And we did hearing after hearing after hearing. And some of those were a little suspect because I know at least one of the people that were called in to testify sells short in the market and was able to run down the private colleges and thus make a lot of money off of his testimony. That's not how it's supposed to work. But we could have looked at all college costs and found some ways to drive down the price of college. But we didn't do that. So now we're standing here and saying, those darn Republicans aren't interested in the cost of college. How wrong can you be? Now, we started this debate on Monday. We voted on it on Tuesday. And then we decided that we would reconsider the vote. That means that the pollsters said this is a pretty good issue for that side of the aisle, and if they can drag it out longer, they can do better. That's not what Congress is about. Congress is about solving problems. Now, there are 2 sides to this thing, and then in the debate earlier I said, well, you know, if you just allow a side-by-side so that you get a vote and we get a vote, we could move on. We could get something done and move on. And the senator from Iowa, Senator Harkin, said, I'd let us do a side-by-side. The next thing I know, the media is saying, you were offered a side-by-side, but you didn't take it. Not true. We were offered an opportunity maybe to put a substitute amendment in at a future time, maybe. That's not the same. That's not the same as getting the same kind of a vote on the same kind of an issue. And that's always what's been done. We've always allowed side-by-sides. But not on this one. We'd rather have the debate going on and try and convince America that both sides of the aisle are doing the wrong thing. So not only are we giving the impression that we're a do-nothing Congress, we're giving them the impression that there's nothing for us to do. Let's see, we didn't do a budget, and we haven't done an appropriation yet. And there are 12 appropriation bills that have to pass this body, and it takes at least a week for each appropriations bill. And we have the authorization bill for defense, which we debate each and every year. and about 100 other issues that need to come up here. But instead, we're not voting this week except the earlier vote on this particular bill and another reconsideration vote. And if you keep doing the same thing, you ought to expect the same kind of results. Now, one of the reasons that we're voting against the bill that's on the floor, it hasn't been to committee, so it's got a lot of flaws in it. I mean, this is a poorly drafted bill. Now, here's kind of how it works. We've said that dentists and doctors and other professionals that are in small corporations, we're picking on small business here, that are in small corporations are cheating on their taxes. They're not paying a payroll tax on their dividends. Now, there is a law against that, and the IRS can enforce that law and does enforce that law. And the examples that have been given are times that they actually caught people doing that and enforced it and won. But to do an audit on this, it would probably take a maximum of 30 minutes of computer time to find every small business corporation that might be cheating on their payroll taxes. But instead of doing that, we're going to use it as a pay-for. And we're saying it's only doctors and dentists and lawyers and accountants and other professionals that are doing this. Well, there's a whole bunch of people that are small business corporations. Small business corporations are an important way to finance small businesses. And it's a little less complicated than the big corporations. But we usually don't pick on them specifically, and we usually don't separate them into separate groups. This one's just the professionals. It doesn't cover the rest of them. And I asked the question earlier. I said, does that mean that you're saving the others for a pay-for something else? You know, if there's a problem, we ought to solve the problem. But the problem can easily be solved by the IRS by just doing the proper job of auditing, if that's the case. But these small business corporations are declaring that a lot of their profit is a dividend. Now, here's an interesting part. We're not talking about the income tax that they pay on that. They're having to pay the income tax, and unlike a big corporation, they're paying the income tax on their personal tax form the minute that it's earned, not when it gets distributed, actually distributed. And most of the small business people have to pay the tax on it but leave it in the business so that they can grow their business. I've been there. I've had a small business corporation, and I know that while you'd like to take the money out, if you want your business to succeed, you've got to keep reinvesting, reinventing, reinvesting. That means you don't get to take the money out. Now, if we were being fair, we would say that anybody that makes over $250,000 in dividends a year would include that as payroll tax. In other words, this is another Warren Buffett thing. How many millions do you think that he makes in a year that come into him as dividends? Now, if those didn't count as dividends, he'd have to pay a Medicare percentage tax on every dime of that. That's what we're talking about here with the professionals that we're going to discriminate against in a bit. We're saying that anything that counts as a dividend for them, they're going to have to pay the Medicare tax on. Why just pick on the professionals? Why not pick on all small business? Of course, small business is the job creator for the country, so we shouldn't be picking on any of them. We should be making sure that they're paying the taxes they owe. But that's not what we're doing. And we're saying Warren Buffett's a special case out there, even though we like to talk about a Warren Buffett tax every once in a while. But we're not going to in this case. So what we're really talking about is the tax that would be for Social Security and Medicare. And if they're really not paying that, they ought to be paying it. But we're saying that that's a good pay-for. Now, how many times do you think that we can take the money that's supposed to go to Social Security and Medicare and spend it on something else and hope that Social Security and Medicare continue to exist? That's what we're doing here. We're saying we're going to take the money from the doctors and the dentists and other professionals, And we're going to make them pay a Social Security and Medicare tax. But we're not going to put that into Medicare. We're not going to put that into Social Security. Instead, we're going to give it to college students so that they have a reduction in their loan. Now, it's kind of interesting. The federal government borrows their money at 2 1/10% maximum. And they're loaning it out to college students already at 3 4/10%. And the law says that July 1st it's supposed to go to 6 8/10%. Where do you think that profit goes? Well, we already spent that on other projects. That's why it needs to go to 6 8/10%, so that we can pay for what we promised we'd pay for. But when we do this, we still have to pay for things. So what we're going to do is we're going to take money that ought to go to Medicare, and we're going to give it to college students. So it's a dilemma. You know, we want to make sure that the rate stays at 3 4/10%. But this body debating back and forth here without getting any votes is not going to resolve it. And even if we got to do an amendment or two, that's a big deal around here, you get to do an amendment or two on the floor, we still wouldn't be able to resolve it because we won't have gotten the people from here and the people from there together in a small group to work out a solution. That's what the leader ought to be doing. That's why you send things to committee. But we're not doing that. Now, the other side has assured me that even though we're not putting this money into the Medicare Trust Fund, that the Medicare Trust Fund will still have all of its money. Let me tell you how that works. As the accountant in the Senate, and there are only 2 of us now. For 15 years I was the only one. But there are 2 of us now. And here's how it works. When the money comes in, a bond is put in the Medicare drawer that says that the federal government owes Medicare that amount of money. But we go ahead and spend the money. Now they say, well, you know, this trust fund it's still intact. No, it only has debt in it. It doesn't have money in it. And I discovered that trying to get some money out of a trust fund once. They said, well, you can't get it out unless you put money in. What kind of a bank account is that? What kind of a trust fund is that? Well, that's what Social Security and Medicare are. They're a bunch of bonds in a drawer that the federal government says we're good for. Well, the way we're spending, we may not be able to be good for that. People ought to be concerned about that. So that's where we are. We're talking about taking the Medicare money and the Social Security money, putting bonds in a drawer, using the money, and saying that all's well in the world and everything is paid for. So our side has said there's a health care slush fund. And there really aren't any criteria set up on it. There's some broad categories that it can be spent on, but there are no real criteria on it. And it has more than enough money to pay for this. And the only person that gets to decide how that money is given out is the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And she has a lot of flexibility on that, and a lot of money coming in. There'll be at least $2 billion every year that'll be allocated to that. And there's already money in that fund, as it started with more. And I think the estimate was actually $80 billion over the life of the health care bill. And the President himself has helped himself to that when we did the payroll extension. That's where the money came from for that. So our side has said, why don't we use that again? You know, that's supposedly real money. But one thing that both sides are doing, they're saying, okay, we're going to freeze the interest rate for 1 year, but we're counting revenue that's supposed to come in for 10 years. Now, how many people in America can say, well, I'm going to have this salary and I might have it for 10 years, but I need to spend it all this year. And if I spend it all this year, how do I live the other 9 years of the time? That's what we're faced with. Every time we do a 10-year payout or 10-year receipt of money in exchange for a 1-year spending project. And we're doing that more and more and more. But again, under our accounting system, that doesn't go down as the same kind of liability and debt situation that increases the debt ceiling or increases the debt for the country. So it's a very clever tactic to use, but it's not honest with the American people. Now, Yes, I'm upset that we're spending all this time on this reconsideration of a vote that we had. When you don't make any changes, you can expect the vote to come out exactly the same, but it allows us for days to harangue on each other, and that's the wrong way to do it. I've asked the leader to pull this bill down, send it to committee, give them a limited amount of time to work on it, and see if they can't come up with a solution that both sides would like and one that doesn't have a lot of loopholes in it. Loopholes? Well, when we're talking about these small business corporations for doctors and dentists, et cetera, we said that if they make more than $250,000 a year, and if the small business corporation has 3 stockholders or less. Now, I don't think they're cheating to the degree that they say that this money would come in. But if they are, I can see the wheels turning out there and saying, let's see, I've got 3 people in my corporation. Oh, my son isn't in the corporation yet, so we'll make that a 4th one. When we get the 4th person in the corporation, we're exempted from this. How much money do you think is really going to come in through that proposal? That's what can be worked out if it goes to committee, and I asked the leader to send it to a committee, give them a limited amount of time to work on it, and see if they can't come up with a solution that both sides will like, because both sides said the interest rate ought to be 3 4/10% for the next year. And then we ought to take a look at the cost of all college so that, as all the people have said, college is important. Education after high school is important. We had one hearing on that in the HELP committee, too. And when we were scheduled to have that, I make a weekly trip out to Wyoming and travel around the state, so I get to talk to a lot of people, and happened to be talking to some 6th graders, and I said, we're going to have this hearing, and the title of it is Education after college, after high school important? And you know what? Those kids all said yes. Now, we had to bring in some people from Harvard and Stanford to convince us of that. We could have been talking about the cost of college, which would get more people going to college. And not just college, but some of the tech schools, too, because we're going to need a lot of different professions in the future years. So let's get this thing to committee and get it resolved and get on with some of the issues that we really need to be working on. Some of the ones that are really big money, that really affect all of America, not just 40% of the students, at about a cost of $7 a month. So with that plea, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Mexico.
Thank you for your recognition, Mr. President. And let me just say I have been sitting here listening to my colleague, the senator from Wyoming, and I think he makes some good points. I think we do need a more open process. I think we need to try as much as possible to work with each other in the committee process. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think we need to allow germane amendments and have a good, robust debate on the bills that are on the floor. But the thing that I wanted to talk about today is the fact that we're in a filibuster. And 52 of us wanted to move forward on this bill, and the 45 of us didn't. And that's why we're locked in this situation. And I rise with regret today, and there is much to regret about yesterday's vote on the student loan bill. First, I regret the false choice between helping students or funding preventive health care. Most Americans support student loans. Most Americans see the value of preventive health care. And yet my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would ask that we sacrifice one for the other. An affordable education should not be held hostage to cuts in preventive health care. That is not a choice, it's an ultimatum. Have we really come to this? We teach our children to set goals, to set priorities. It should surprise no one that they seriously question our goals, our priorities. It's like a bus heading toward a cliff. and we could turn it around, and we ought to be able to do so without throwing students under it. The other side says they care about our nation's students too. Perhaps, but there is caring and then there is devotion. And once again, their devotion is for the wealthiest among us and not for the 7 million students worried about how they will pay for their education. So back to choices. As any bright college student can tell us, it always comes down to choices. How do we protect the Stafford student loan program? By further cuts to preventive health care, by weakening research to prevent disease, by cutting our response to public health emergencies? No, of course not. We do it by closing a tax loophole, by requiring the wealthy to pay their fair share of payroll taxes. Mr. President, I would submit this is not and should not be a tough choice, but apparently it is. In fact, it's so tough that the other side doesn't want to talk about it any further. The result, yet another filibuster, which brings me to my other regret. Once again, this Senate, once again, this Senate is broken, in limbo, stuck. Once again, the American people look on in dismay. The U.S. Senate was once called the greatest deliberative body in the world, and now it reminds me of that song, The Sound of Silence, and no one dared disturb the sound of silence. That is what we hear more and more. Silence, no debate, no discussion. Yesterday's vote was the 21st filibuster by Republicans of a Democratic bill this Congress. The 21st, and the year is young. This ugly parade of filibusters, and for what? Let's see, to block the President's job bill, to stop the repeal of tax breaks for big oil companies, to not help local governments pay for teachers and first responders, and to prevent a minimum tax on households earning more than $1 million a year. And now, student loans, another filibuster, more sounds of silence. I have previously joined my colleagues and friends, Senator Merkley of Oregon and Senator Harkin of Iowa, to push for fundamental reforms in how the Senate operates. The reason then, and even more abundantly clear now, is that the Senate was broken. This is tragic. At a time when our country needs us to act, we do almost nothing. It's no wonder that Congress's approval ratings are at an all-time low. Instead of working to solve the major problems that our country faces, we retreat to the shadows. In order to have real change in the process, the Senate has to change the way we go about business. I've advocated and will continue to advocate that the Senate, at the beginning of each Congress, should adopt its own rules by a simple majority vote. The Constitution clearly gives us this authority, and it's time to exercise it. Yet at the beginning of each Congress, the Senate, unlike the House of Representatives, does not vote to adopt its rules. The Senate simply accepts the rules of the previous Congress, rules that lead to the unfettered abuse of filibusters, rules that have made the Senate a graveyard of good ideas. When we fail to reform our rules, their abuse becomes an entrenched part of the Senate's culture. And that is where we are today. After years of filibuster abuse, we have turned the Senate into a super-majoritarian body. To do anything in today's Senate requires 60 votes. Yesterday's vote on the student loan bill was a prime example. We can't even get onto the bill. 52 senators voted to move forward, but 45 senators chose to filibuster. Once again, minority obstruction prevents majority rule. That's not democratic and is not how our founders intended the Senate to operate. This has to change. A new Congress will begin next January. Right now, we don't know which party will control the House, the Senate, or the White House, but it shouldn't matter. The Senate must reform itself. Regardless of which party has control, not for the good of the Democrats or the Republicans, but for the good of the country. The Senate will have many new members next January, and I think most of them will want to become part of a functioning legislative body, one where they can bring their best ideas and have them debated, a body where all views are heard and considered, but majority rule is once again the norm. That institution cannot exist under the existing rules, and we continue to prove that on a daily basis. The reforms Senator Harkin, Merkley, and I proposed at the beginning of this Congress had strong support, but did not pass. And so here we are, 21 filibusters later. And the line of Americans who wait for a Congress that works, that actually gets things done, that comes together to find solutions, that line just got longer by 7 million students. Several of my constituents have watched as they've seen this filibuster proceed, and they've written me on my Facebook page, and I thought I would share a couple of those comments because they really go to the heart about what's happening on student loans. Here, Tracy Edwards writes me, "Student loans are vital. My daughter graduates this Saturday from UNM, the University of New Mexico. Without student loans, this day would not have come. Her daughter wouldn't have graduated without a student loan. In 6 months, we will start repayment of those loans. I'm not asking anyone else to pay my daughter's loan, but why should we be punished with an increase for trying to ensure our children get a solid education? If a bankruptcy is filed, you could lose your home, your car, your credit, but student loans are mandated for repayment, no matter what. Is it too much to ask for a fair interest rate? I think the 1% will not be happy until it is a world of haves and have-nots." Thank you, Tracy, for that comment. Donna Kubiak writes, "I agree. My daughter is a single mom of 3 kids and working on her degree to teach elementary school. Without financial aid, she will have to work for a minimum wage job and get welfare indefinitely." Thank you, Donna, for that comment. And, Mr. President, as we know, this issue is absolutely crucial to 7 million American students who don't want to see just a couple of months from now those interest rates skyrocket. I believe the estimate is about $1,000 per student. They can't afford that. We need to get this bill on the floor. We need to cut out the filibusters, and we need to settle down and do the amendment process, do the debate, and produce a bill. Thank you, Mr. President. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President.
Senator from Delaware.
Mr. President, I rise today to talk about where we are right now. Excuse me. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the proceedings under the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to share my views on where we are procedurally here in the United States Senate on the issue of student loan debt, of the interest rates that we charge those who take out Stafford loans, but also the larger question of student loan debt and how we make the highway, the pathway to higher education for America's students clearer, fairer, and more predictable. Yeats once said that education is not the filling of an empty bucket, but the lighting of a fire. Educating our young people is one of the most important things we do as a society. Lighting the fire of curiosity, of imagination, of enthusiasm, of entrepreneurship, of creativity through education, particularly higher education, is one of the things that distinguishes the United States from many other countries around the world. We've long had an enormous advantage in having one of the world's greatest educational systems. But as you know so well, Mr. President, in your home state of Vermont and my home state of Delaware, there are so many working families who today deeply question whether their pathway towards higher education for their children will be as predictable, as fair, as straight as it's been for the generation past. When I meet with business owners all up and down the state of Delaware, these innovators, these job creators deliver the same message. They have jobs available. They're ready to hire people who have the education and the skills that they need to compete and participate in the modern economy. So today, with more than 12.5 million Americans out of work, with more than 30,000 Delawareans in my home state out of work, the question becomes, how do we make higher education, which includes skills training, vocational school, community college, more affordable and more accessible? One thing we can do, one thing we have to do, is address the staggering debt that lingers with graduates sometimes decades after completing school. We're faced today, Mr. President, with two problems, one short-term, one longer-term. The short-term problem is that without immediate congressional action, as you well know, student loan interest rates for millions of Americans will double on the 1st of July. If we allow the rates on federally subsidized Stafford loans to increase from 3.4 to 6.8%, we'll saddle student borrowers with a future additional $6.3 billion in interest payments. This could impact, in my state of Delaware, more than 18,000 student borrowers, burdening families who are still struggling to recover from the recession with unexpected additional bills. Lots of people have contacted my office. They've called, they've written, they've sent me postings on Facebook, they've tweeted to contact my office and many others here about their concerns. Alexandra, a recent college graduate from Wilmington, Delaware, is one of many who've reached out to me, and she recently wrote, "I can confidently say that going to a four-year college has prepared me more than I thought I could for success in my job search. Because of this education, however, and its costs, I'm facing $20,000 of debt with only the potential of a lower-paying job." Alexandra is deeply concerned about the significant debt she's facing, and she urged me to work hard to freeze the interest rate on her student loans rather than letting it double. I agree and fully support our efforts on this floor to fix this short-term problem by freezing interest rates on Stafford loans. So I'm disappointed that yesterday's vote, the failure to invoke cloture, the failure to get past a filibuster by the other party, has prevented the Senate from moving forward and discussing a possible realistic solution. It's important for the Congress to confront this rise in interest rates, and I hope we can come to a bipartisan consensus. But let's be clear. Even doing that will not solve a larger long-term problem. Addressing this rise in interest rates won't change how much students borrow, numbers that are only steadily growing. Just this week, our nation's cumulative total student loan debt crossed the $1 trillion threshold. $1 trillion. That is an enormous burden on young people just getting started in life, in their careers. If we are to really address this challenge, we have to help students and their families make smarter decisions about financing their education. We can empower students to make more informed choices and fully understand the relationship between the debt they take on, their choice of major or studies, and their future career path by providing more and earlier and better information about this. Financial literacy, a clear understanding of how or whether borrowing will help raise their earning potential later, is a key part of the real solution to our country's ongoing and exploding student loan debt. We can also seek, Mr. President, creative solutions that look beyond the obvious and really work to make higher education more affordable. That's why I'm so glad I've been able to work with my friend Congressman Chaka Fattah of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on new legislation to encourage private investment in college scholarships on a community basis for future students. Congressman Fattah showed tremendous leadership in crafting a bill, and we introduced a new tax credit that will help more kids to afford a college education. Entitled Communities Committed to College Tax Credit Act of 2012, the bill provides tax incentives to encourage private donors to support and sustain educational trusts that make higher education possible to all the young people of a chosen community. These private donors, encouraged by a 50% tax credit, will help fund need-based college scholarships, fueling a new generation of achievement by making higher education more affordable and reducing the need for student loans. But equally importantly, in places where these programs are already in place, like Syracuse, it changes expectations. When young people from the very beginning of schooling, from the first grade, the second grade, the third grade, know that there is some possibility, some savings account, some community program that will fund their higher education, the likelihood that they will finish high school and go on to college increases by 4 to 7 times. So I support Congressman Fattah's innovative effort to support community trusts that support higher education. That's just one idea for looking beyond the box and working to make higher education more accessible. Here's another. The American Dream Accounts Act is a bipartisan, bicameral bill to encourage real partnerships between schools, colleges, nonprofits, and businesses to develop secure, web-based, individual, portable student accounts that contain information about each student's academic preparedness and skills. It also directly tackles the issue of student loan debt by working with students on financial literacy from a very young age. Instead of having each of these different resources available as they are now separately, siloed, it connects them across existing education programs at the state and federal levels. I'm grateful to Senator Bingaman of New Mexico and Senator Rubio of Florida for joining me as original co-sponsors here in the Senate. This bill is a potentially powerful step toward helping more students of all income levels and backgrounds access, afford, and complete a college education. It's rooted in my own experience with the I Have a Dream Foundation, which has helped more than 15,000 young people all over the country to achieve the dream of higher education. Mr. President, if we want American companies, American workers, and American families to compete and win in the global economy, we have to help our students afford higher education. It really is that simple. I look forward to working with my colleagues to find solutions that promote affordable, accessible higher education, because early action, early engagement can help change the future, change the outcomes for our kids, and make it possible for them to achieve the American dream. It's my hope we can overcome this needless filibuster, yesterday's setback, and that all of us can come together and achieve what we say we want to do together, a responsible path forward that avoids needless additional burdens on working families trying to finance their children's education, and that we can look seriously at these two proposals I've touched on briefly today that will help our students of the future understand and afford higher education to make their American dream possible. Thank you.
Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, I thank my colleague from Delaware for speaking to some critical issues